Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into one of the most wildly suppressed technological mysteries of the 20th century. Seriously, this one has it all. We are looking at a bizarre intersection of black-budget physics, rogue engineering, and what the source documents describe as a ruthless intelligence cover-up that ultimately ended in a 1978 assassination. The man at the center of this investigation? George Van Tassel. And the machine he built? The Integratron. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this, because right off the bat, we're hit with this massive paradox. According to the source material, we have a top-tier, highly trained aerospace engineer who just abruptly walks away from an incredibly lucrative career in the military-industrial complex. And he doesn't just jump ship to a competitor, right? No. Instead, he moves his entire family out into the scorching Mojave Desert to build this massive, completely non-metallic wooden dome. Like, why? What on earth was he trying to build that the military absolutely refused to fund?
Section 1. Aerospace Defector. George Van Tassel.
To really understand his motives, we kind of have to strip away the myths and look at his actual resume. And this brilliantly illustrates the huge divide between the sanitized public story and the forensic reality. If you look up Van Tassel online today, the mainstream narrative, which our sources argue is meticulously curated, paints him as just this harmless, quirky 1950s high school dropout who ran a new age UFO cult. But the intelligence reality? Totally different story. Before he headed to the desert in 1947, this guy was a highly trained aviation mechanic and a flight inspector. He worked directly for the big players, Douglas Aircraft, Hughes Aviation, and Lockheed. I mean, he had a literal Lockheed pedigree and completely understood the absolute bleeding edge of terrestrial aerospace engineering.
Section 2. The Telluric Grid, powering the dome.
So, a guy with that kind of intense background doesn't just go build a giant wooden dome in the desert for fun, right? He was engineering something very, very specific. To understand his machine, we first have to understand what powered it. Have you ever heard of telluric currents? Think of them as these invisible, massive, underground rivers of low-frequency electricity that just flow continuously through the Earth's crust, driven by the planet's magnetic field. Van Tassel wasn't trying to build some conventional power plant here. He was literally trying to plug his machine directly into the Earth's geodynamo.
And get this, he anchored his entire project right next to a geological anomaly called Giant Rock. This isn't just a big stone. It's a massive 7-story freestanding boulder that covers nearly 6,000 square feet, and it's composed entirely of highly piezoelectric quartz monzonite. Basically, in the physics of the Telluric Grid, Giant Rock acts as this gigantic, macroscopic terrestrial antenna. It sits flawlessly right on top of a major intersection of those underground electrical rivers, perfectly grounding the atmospheric charge into the Earth.
Van Tassel used this insanely charged environment to construct the Integratron. It was a 38-foot-tall dome built without a single piece of ferromagnetic metal. None, just wood, fiberglass, and concrete. Now, in clear weather, the Earth's voltage naturally increases with altitude. So up at its 38-foot apex, the Integratron was sitting in an ambient atmospheric potential of over 1,500 volts. Just imagine standing inside a structure that's sucking up free electrostatic potential right out of the thin desert air. The machine literally acted as the positive terminal, while the telluric grid deep below served as the infinite ground.
Section 3. Physics of Immortality. Halting Entropy.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what all this massive electricity was actually being used for. Look at the architectural design of the dome itself. Van Tassel idolized something called Helmholtz resonance. You know that deep humming tone you get when you blow over the top of an empty glass bottle? Well, imagine scaling that exact effect up to the size of a building. By constructing the dome using highly specific geometric ratios and entirely without metal to eliminate any magnetic interference, the whole structure acted as a massive acoustic tuning port. It wasn't just built to look cool. The acoustic resonance of that cavity was meticulously engineered to actively manipulate the quantum vacuum.
Inside this dome sat a massive rotating mechanical armature called a die rod. As this thing spun around, it collected and cranked up ambient static electricity into the millions of volts. By combining that mind-bending electrostatic pressure with the acoustic resonance of the dome, the source states Van Tassel was artificially inducing the Casimir effect. Simply put, this is a quantum phenomenon where you actively lower the vacuum energy density inside a chamber. He was basically manipulating the localized fabric of spacetime itself. And once he generated this massive electrostatic field, he applied it directly to human biology, essentially scaling up the prior work of an engineer named George Lockheed.
According to the Lockheed protocol outlined in the text, you can think of every single human cell as a microscopic rechargeable battery. A healthy cell naturally oscillates at a high amplitude, with a resting potential sitting somewhere between -40 and -80 millivolts. So, biological decay, disease, and aging, which we call entropy, is mathematically defined as a cell simply losing that vibrational amplitude. Its internal battery drains out, and it starts vibrating at a much lower, dissonant frequency.
So the crucial point is this. The Integratron was designed as a macroscopic multi-wave oscillator. That intense electrostatic field acted as a high-voltage carrier wave. The idea was that as a patient sat inside, their cells would be completely flooded with coherent energy, powered by the Earth itself. The text claims this immense pressure literally forced the DNA double helix to physically uncoil, emit perfect phase-locked biophotons, and mathematically halt biological entropy. Let that sink in for a second. Van Tassel engineered a machine designed to literally reverse the thermodynamic arrow of biological time. He was trying to cure aging.
Section 4. The space-time threat. Torsion fields. But if successfully halting human aging wasn't wildly disruptive enough, the source highlights this terrifying secondary capability of the machine. By spinning massive electrostatic charges inside a perfectly tuned acoustic cavity, the physics mathematically dictate the generation of a macroscopic torsion field. The documents state that if Van Tassel had actually successfully activated the primary armature, he would have induced frame dragging, creating what's called a localized closed time-light curve, or CTC. In plain English, the occupant wouldn't just get a cellular reboot, they would mathematically detach from the linear progression of time entirely. It was a time machine. He was essentially building an unclassified, civilian iteration of Project Looking Glass using nothing but wood and static electricity.
Section 5. Suppression Protocol. The CIA response.
Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds, because a rogue aerospace engineer building a working mass reduction and temporal displacement engine completely outside the black budget, yeah, that triggered a catastrophic response. Look at how claustrophobic this timeline gets. In 1947, he arrives in the Mojave. By 1954, construction on the Integratron is officially underway. Fast forward to 1975, and the famous Church Committee hearings expose a completely covert CIA biological weapon. And then we hit the climax. On February 9, 1978, literally just weeks before the Integratron's primary armature was scheduled to be powered up and fully activated, George Van Tassel suddenly dies.
Now, the official cause of death was listed as a sudden heart attack. But the source document draws a seriously chilling forensic parallel to the weapon that was exposed just 3 years earlier during those Church Committee hearings, the infamous CIA heart attack gun. This was a modified Colt M1911 pistol that fired a microscopic frozen dart. The payload? Saxitoxin, a highly potent neurotoxin that melts instantly the second it hits the bloodstream. It was engineered specifically to induce a biologically untraceable myocardial infarction, leaving literally nothing behind but a microscopic red dot on the skin. It's the perfect, totally silent assassination.
Following his death, Van Tassel was immediately cremated. That guaranteed no independent toxicological autopsy could ever be performed. And right in the immediate aftermath, unidentified operatives executed what the source documents refer to as a Tier 6 confiscation operation. They systematically raided the entire Integratron facility. Every single operational note, technical schematic, core mechanical armature, and mathematical blueprint detailing the complex wiring and electrostatic physics just vanished. The machine was, for all intents and purposes, mathematically lobotomized, left completely hollow.
The source document delivers this devastating ultimate conclusion regarding the motive for the cover-up, stating the deep state stole his blueprints to ensure that localized gravity and cellular decay remain inescapable forces. The implication here is massive. They simply could not allow the planetary energy monopoly to be broken by a civilian.
Which leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative question based on the evidence presented in this explainer. If George Van Tassel was really just a harmless eccentric, and the Integratron was nothing more than an acoustically pleasing wooden sound bath out in the desert, then why the immediate cremation? And why did the intelligence apparatus systematically raid the facility and completely erase its mathematics? I'll leave you to weigh the sanitized mainstream myth against the deeply paranoid forensic reality we've explored today. Thanks so much for joining us.